Well, we want to thank you all for joining in with us this evening. We're going to sing and worship together. Though the earth cried out for blood, satisfied her hunger was, her billows calmed on the raging seas. The souls of men she craved. The sun and moon from balcony turned their head in disbelief. Their precious love would taste the sting, disfigured and disdain. On Friday, a thief, on Sunday, a king, laid down in grief, but awoke with the keys to hell on that day. Firstborn of the slain, the man Jesus Christ laid death in his grave. Oh, oh, in darkness slept the morning sun of righteousness, but rose to shame the throes of death and overturn his rule. Now daughters and the sons of men would pay not their dues again. The debt of blood they owed was rent when the day rolled anew. On Friday a thief, on Sunday a king, laid down in grief, but awoke with the keys to hell on that day. Firstborn of the slain, the man Jesus Christ laid death in his grave. Death in his grave. Death in his grave. Death in his grave. On Sunday a king, laid down in grief, but awoke with the keys to hell on that day. Firstborn of the slain, the man Jesus Christ laid death in his grave. Oh, oh, oh.
no power, no wisdom, but I will boast in Jesus Christ, His death and resurrection. What should I gain from His reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart: His wounds have paid my ransom. What should I gain from His reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart: His wounds have paid my ransom.
Well, Good Friday, everybody. Glad that you are with us here on this online format as we continue to be in the stay-at-home order here. Just wanted to take a moment and share a devotional thought pertaining to Good Friday. Believe it or not, this is actually a devotional thought that I had the privilege of sharing with our small group leaders a couple of weeks ago, and thought that it was a poignant thought for reflection on the Good Friday event that we mourn and celebrate at the same time, but also that is a thought with regard to the Good Friday message as it pertains to our current situation. While we are still living in a world that is in crisis right now due to the ongoing pandemic. And so, the Garden of Gethsemane has, the story of the Garden of Gethsemane and Jesus praying there has always been a story that's resonated with me, primarily because I love that while we see Jesus' divinity and his obedience to the Father and his ultimate action that leads out of the Garden of Gethsemane scene, we see his humanity on display in this particular instance. And so I wanted to actually, for this Good Friday, talk about his time of prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. Specifically, we're going to look at the Gospel of Matthew's account, which is found in Matthew chapter 26, verses 36 through 46. But before we jump in there, I want to highlight something that Jesus says in the Gospel of John. There is a scene in the Gospel of John where he is talking to his closest followers, his disciples, his students, and he gives what we often call a farewell discourse. At least that's what scholars have deemed it. And it's captured in John 14 through 17. And the reason it's called the farewell discourse is because Jesus shares an intimate moment with his followers, gives them words of encouragement, prays with them, prays over them, and just really leans into them before the passion narrative unfolds. And in the middle of this farewell discourse, Jesus says something in chapter 15, verses 12 through 17. I want to read it really quickly before we jump back to the Matthew passage. He says this, he says, "This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because the servant does not know what the master is doing. But I have called you friends, because I have made known to you everything that I have heard from my Father. You did not choose me, but I chose you. And I appointed you to go and bear fruit, fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you whatever you ask him in my name. I'm giving you these commands so that you may love one another." Now, I just find it fascinating here. Jesus points out that his followers are not called servants any longer, but they are called friends. And he qualifies this by saying that that friendship is on its truest display, and love is shown in its fullest expression when one lays down their life for their friends, which is what Jesus is going to do when he goes to the cross. And so when we go back in the book of Matthew, but we go forward to the Garden of Gethsemane scene, it's interesting. Jesus will ask his disciples to pray. He'll actually handpick 3 disciples, Peter, James, and John, kind of the inner circle within the inner circle, to come and to be with him, to pray with him, and to be on watch as he awaits his captor's arrival. And it's interesting here because when Jesus calls his disciples friends, he is basically saying that I care about you enough that I'm going to lay down my life for you, but I also I'm relying on you as a friend, in the same way that we would think about any friends, and that is no more on display than in this scene in the Garden of Gethsemane. So this is what happens in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 26 through verse 36 through 46. It says, "Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, 'Sit here while I go over there and pray.' He took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, that's James and John, and began to be grieved and agitated. Then he said to them, 'I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me.' And going on a little further, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, 'My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not what I want, but what you want.' Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, 'So, could you not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit is indeed willing, but the flesh is weak.' Again, he went away for the 2nd time and prayed, 'My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done.' Again he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the 3rd time, saying the same words. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, 'Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand.'" Now, there's a couple things that I want to point out here. One, Gethsemane is in the middle of this place called the Mount of Olives. It's a place that Jesus went to time and time again. In fact, that's why when Judas sold him out, he was able to tell the folks that were looking to bind up and arrest Jesus where he was going to be at, because this was a common place for Jesus to take his disciples. But Gethsemane means olive press, and so it's an appropriate title for a place where Jesus is being pressed. You can feel that in his humanity, in his prayer, in his pleading with God, in his state of grief, in his state of being agitated, being deeply grieved, even to the point of death, he says. And then we can also capture, not only is Jesus being pressed in this scenario, but we can tell that Jesus is reliant on his friends. When he's about to go through his deepest, darkest time, dare I say the scariest time that he's ever faced, he wants those closest with him to be on watch, to pray with him, to be by his side. And we can almost sense the hurt in Jesus when he goes repeatedly and finds his disciples didn't even have the energy to stay up with him as he's on guard. Now, there's something else about this place, Gethsemane. The distance and the geography of the location would have been such at the time that as Jesus is having this prayer moment, this wrestling with the Father, his grief, but also his willingness to be obedient to the Father, he would have been able to look out into the distance and see his captors coming with torches. And so not only is Jesus asking God the Father to take this cup from him, but Jesus has an easy out. He can see in the distance what his captors cannot. And so despite all of this, despite his friends letting him down, despite his grief and anguish, despite his very real desire to not have to go through this suffering, and despite the fact that Jesus has this escape route, Jesus elects to stay the course, to be obedient to the Father, and ultimately to be the true friend that even his closest of friends couldn't be for him in that moment. And I find that to be an encouragement during this time that we're facing right now as a people, while we're in self-isolation, while we're under a stay-at-home order, while we may feel anxious, alone, while we may feel just afraid of what's to come and not really know how long this thing is going to go. I want us to be reminded of the fact that Jesus shows us what true friendship, true love is by laying down his life for us. And that's what we celebrate on Good Friday. And if we're having all of those feelings that many of us are experiencing right now during this time, we should find the Good Friday message to be a comfort to us, to those of us that are having those feelings of despair and uncertainty and anxiety right now, because Jesus is our true friend, and he showed up not only before we even knew we needed him, but he showed up despite the fact that it was going to be a grueling, agonizing situation for him. But furthermore, at this time, while we recognize that we are collectively feeling this anxiety and this despair in this particular moment, Jesus gives us an example of what friendship looks like by laying down his life for one another. And his command to his disciples in the Gospel of John is for us to love one another. And so because Jesus laid his life down for us, and because we get to experience the grace of God through that, I want to encourage you at this time that in light of that, and in light of Jesus' command to love one another, and in light of the fact that Jesus showed us the prime example of that by laying down his life for us, I want to encourage you during this Good Friday time, and as we look on toward Easter to celebrate the resurrection, that you'll just check in on the people in your life, the friends, the family, your small group members, whoever they may be, and just give them an encouraging word, even if it's just a quick text message, just because you want to show them that you love them and that they are worth taking time out of the new normal, the new busyness, and maybe even the new just emotional stress that we're in, to show them that you love them because Jesus first loved you and me. And so I hope that that's an encouragement to you during this time of Good Friday as we celebrate and mourn the fact that Jesus laid down his life for us. And while we look ahead to Sunday, Resurrection Sunday, recognizing that God didn't keep his son, Jesus, in the grave, but raised him from the dead, conquering sin and death and giving all of us life. And we have that hope even when the times feel not hopeful. So remember that Jesus, the true friend that we need right now, laid his life down for us. Thank you for taking this time to participate in this service, and we hope it is an encouragement to you. Be blessed.